They called him Ezzelino da Romano, but centuries later, people would remember him by another name, the Devil Prince of Italy. Born in the year 1194 in the sunlit plains of northern Italy, Ezzelino was not born under a star. He was born under a shadow. His family, the House of Romano, was powerful but divided, a nest of serpents hissing with ambition. The child's birth was marked by omens: a comet streaking red across the sky, dogs howling for hours without pause, and monks in nearby monasteries claiming they had seen fire rising from the river that night. His mother was said to have fainted as she looked upon him for the first time, whispering that the baby's eyes looked too old for this world. From the beginning there was something unnatural about Ezzelino. As a child he did not cry, he watched. When other boys played with wooden swords, he dismantled birds to see how their wings worked. He was brilliant, silent, and cruel. His father feared him, his tutors avoided him, and priests whispered that the boy's soul was already marked. Yet in his eyes burned a light of cold intelligence, the kind that could build empires or destroy them. Italy in those days was not a single nation but a battlefield of city-states: Verona, Padua, Venice, and Milan, each clawing for power. The Pope in Rome and the Holy Roman Emperor waged endless war for control, and between them stood ambitious lords like Ezzelino's family, waiting for the chance to carve out their own kingdoms. It was a world of shifting loyalties, betrayal, and blood, the perfect stage for a man like Ezzelino to rise. When he was only a teenager, Ezzelino began to show his true nature. In a petty feud between local nobles, he personally led a small band of men to raid a rival's estate. They found no soldiers, only peasants. But Ezzelino ordered the massacre anyway. When his companions hesitated, he dismounted, drew his sword, and cut down the first man himself. By the end of the day the fields ran red, and Ezzelino stood over the bodies with a strange calmness. Not triumph, not anger, just fascination. "Blood," he murmured, "is the color of power." That was the day he learned something. Mercy is weakness, and fear is the only currency that never loses value. As he grew, his cunning became as infamous as his cruelty. He learned to smile when he needed allies and to strike when they least expected it. He spoke little but observed everything. By his early 20s, he had already gained a reputation among Italian lords as a man you should never cross, and a man you might need to survive. When Emperor Frederick II began his campaigns to control northern Italy, Ezzelino saw his opportunity. The emperor was brilliant but brutal, a man of science, war, and heresy. Ezzelino served him not out of loyalty but admiration. In Frederick he saw a reflection of himself, another man who believed God was just a story told to keep weak men obedient. Together they unleashed devastation upon the cities that opposed imperial rule. Under the emperor's banner, Ezzelino commanded armies that burned towns and slaughtered thousands. But while most generals killed for victory, Ezzelino killed for something else: an obsession, a need to dominate. His soldiers said he would ride among the dead after battle, dismount, and stare at the corpses as though listening to them. He ordered prisoners impaled along the roads to remind the living what defiance cost. The Pope denounced him as the servant of Satan. The people began to whisper that no sword could pierce his flesh, that the devil himself had granted him invincibility. And Ezzelino did not deny it. He welcomed the fear, fed on it. It was his weapon, sharper than any blade. One night, after the sack of Padua, Ezzelino entered a church where dozens of townspeople had taken refuge. The priest begged for mercy, holding up a crucifix. Ezzelino looked at the cross for a long moment, then turned to his men and ordered the doors barred. By morning the church was ashes, and so were the souls inside. From that day even his allies began to fear him. But Ezzelino believed he was destined for something greater. He was not content to be a warlord. He wanted to be a ruler, a god of fear. And to do that he began building something, a fortress unlike any other in Italy. They said its walls were so thick that screams could not escape them. Its dungeons were filled not with criminals, but with anyone who displeased him: nobles, scholars, even children. Some were never seen again. Those who escaped spoke of rooms where people were flayed alive, of banquet halls where Ezzelino dined while executions were carried out in front of him. His cruelty became legendary, but so did his control. No rebellion in his lands lasted more than a week. No plot survived his spies. People said his informants could read thoughts, that his shadow fell long even in daylight. And always at the center of his power was his belief that fear was divine. He would say to his commanders, "God may rule the heavens, but I rule the hearts of men," and their hearts beat with terror. Even the emperor who had once praised him began to worry. Frederick's envoys tried to rein in his excesses, but Ezzelino ignored them. He saw himself no longer as a servant of the empire but as something above it, something eternal. He had begun to believe in his own myth. And yet, behind the iron cruelty there was something else, a secret. Some claimed that Ezzelino had discovered a ritual, an ancient practice from the East, one that promised immortality through human sacrifice. Monks whispered that he drank the blood of the young to keep his strength. His face, they said, never aged, and his eyes shone unnaturally bright, as if lit from within. By the time he reached middle age, his name was spoken only in whispers. Mothers in Verona scared their children into obedience with his name. Sleep now, or Ezzelino will come for you. And still he wanted more. More power, more fear, more darkness. He began to see himself not as a man but as a symbol, the embodiment of divine punishment, sent to cleanse a corrupt world through terror. He said once, "Mercy is the lie of the weak. I am truth made flesh." But truth, as history teaches us, has a price, and for Ezzelino da Romano that price was coming. They said Ezzelino had conquered fear, but in truth, he had only learned to control it. He wielded it like a weapon, sculpted it into art. By now, he ruled Verona and most of northern Italy as a tyrant clothed in authority. His banner flew over ruined cities, his soldiers marched under the symbol of a black eagle, and everywhere they went, death followed. When Ezzelino entered a city, the people did not cheer. They hid. Windows shuttered, priests prayed behind closed doors, and children were told not to look directly at him. His face had grown pale and sharp, his eyes sunk deep into their sockets. They said you could see hell flickering behind them. He wore black armor etched with symbols no one could decipher, and he never removed his gloves in public. Some believed he did this to hide the stains of blood that never washed away. Others whispered that his hands had changed, the fingers too long, the nails too dark, as if they belonged to someone or something else. Ezzelino's rule was lawless in the sense that he was the law. He created his own codes, and they were written not on parchment but on flesh. If a town resisted paying his taxes, he had its leaders executed by slow mutilation and displayed their remains at the city gates. When Verona's bishop dared to question his cruelty, Ezzelino had him stripped, chained to the cathedral doors, and left to die beneath the same cross he once preached from. The Pope called him a beast more cruel than any pagan. Dante would later call him the scourge of God. But Ezzelino did not see himself as evil. He believed he was chosen to burn the rot out of humanity, to rule by terror because men were too weak to rule themselves. Compassion, he said, is the disease that kills kingdoms. He began hosting feasts, not of celebration but of intimidation. Long tables were set with gold goblets and rare wines, while prisoners, captured nobles, and suspected traitors were dragged in one by one. Each would be questioned, humiliated, tortured, and executed while Ezzelino dined, watching in silence. He would occasionally raise his goblet, not in toast but in mockery, whispering, "To truth." One story tells of a captured rebel commander, a man known for his bravery. When brought before Ezzelino, he refused to kneel. Instead of ordering his death, Ezzelino smiled, a thin, cold smile, and told him he would live. The man was imprisoned, fed daily, treated well. But each night, one of his men was taken and executed outside his window. Within a month, the commander begged for death. Ezzelino granted it and called it mercy. But behind his calculated cruelty lay something darker, an obsession with immortality. The older he grew, the less he trusted sleep. He claimed dreams were doorways through which enemies could enter. He surrounded himself with alchemists, astrologers, and mystics who promised to uncover the secret of eternal life. Some brought him strange texts from the East, writings on blood rituals, human vitality, and forbidden sciences. And soon strange things began to happen in his castles. Servants vanished without trace. Monks spoke of screams at midnight. One chronicler wrote that Ezzelino would retreat for days into a private chamber, and when he emerged he looked younger. His skin pale but smooth. His eyes sharper. Some swore they saw blood on his lips. In his final years of reign, the Devil Prince's cruelty turned into something beyond reason. He ordered every family in Verona with more than 3 sons to offer one to his service. Those who refused were executed. He created an army loyal only to him, boys trained from childhood to kill, stripped of emotion, raised on discipline and brutality. He called them the Sons of the Flame. They were forbidden to marry, to laugh, or to cry. Their only purpose was to serve Ezzelino's will. It was said that when these soldiers marched, they did so in silence. Their armor blackened, their banners blood-red. They did not sing war songs. They didn't need to. Their silence was a hymn to fear itself. Ezzelino began to believe himself immortal. He stopped attending Mass, claiming that confession was for the weak. He mocked priests and declared that heaven belonged to cowards. "If God exists," he once said, "he hides behind the screams of the dying." And yet, as always, power invites envy, and fear breeds rebellion. The cities he conquered began to conspire against him. The Pope called for a crusade not against Muslims nor heretics, but against one man, Ezzelino da Romano. Imagine that, a crusade for the soul of Italy, against a Christian lord whose evil had become legendary. But Ezzelino did not panic. He welcomed it. He saw it as proof of his divinity. "They come for me," he told his generals, "but they will find no man, only the judgment they fear." As armies gathered against him, Venice, Milan, and the Papal States united, he prepared for war with a strange calm. Before battle, he walked among his soldiers, silent, his armor glinting like obsidian. Some said the air grew colder wherever he passed. He promised them victory and they believed him, because until then he had never truly lost. The first clash came near the fields of Soncino. The coalition forces outnumbered him 5-1, but Ezzelino fought like a demon. He led from the front, cutting through ranks of men, his sword moving faster than human sight. Even his enemies later admitted, it was as if death itself had taken form. But even devils can bleed. By the next campaign, betrayal crept in from within. His allies, weary of his madness, turned against him. His own family plotted his downfall. Cities that once bowed began to rise. Ezzelino's empire began to crack, not from the swords of his enemies, but from the fear that had once sustained it. And as fear turned to hatred, hatred turned to rebellion. His castles were stormed. His soldiers deserted. And the devil prince of Italy, who had once ruled by terror alone, was finally forced to face the one thing he could never control, his end. But that, as they say, is a story of its own. The year was 1259. The empire of Ezzelino III da Romano, once a shadow stretching across northern Italy, had begun to crumble. The devil prince, the man who made fear his crown, was finally hunted like a beast. His allies were gone, his fortresses betrayed, and his enemies, once trembling before him, now marched with vengeance in their hearts. They said when Ezzelino looked out from the towers of Soncino for the last time, he saw the world he had built, burning. Villages that once whispered his name in terror now shouted it with hatred. His black banners, torn and stained, lay trampled in the mud. The sons of the flame, his silent army, had either been slain or captured. Only a few remained, fighting to the end, refusing to surrender even as the ground beneath them turned red. But Ezzelino did not despair. No, he laughed. Witnesses claimed that as his enemies surrounded him, he stood in his armor, blood-soaked and broken, and said, "You cannot kill me. You can only free me." His last stand took place at the fortress of Cassano d'Adda. The combined armies of the Lombard League and the papacy had cornered him. For 3 days the battle raged, a storm of fire, steel, and screams. Ezzelino fought like a creature unbound by flesh. His sword shattered, but he kept fighting. His horse was cut down, but he continued on foot, slashing, roaring, bleeding, until the field itself seemed alive with his fury. When he was finally taken, it was not by strength, but by fate. A crossbow bolt tore through his chest, piercing the armor that had protected him for decades. He fell, clutching the wound, but even then he refused to scream. They dragged him alive, bound in chains, before the governor of Milan. The man who had once called himself chosen now stood surrounded by priests reciting prayers of exorcism. But Ezzelino only smiled, blood trickling from his lips, whispering, "Do you pray to save me, or to save yourselves?" They tried to heal him, not out of mercy but to humiliate him publicly. The Pope had ordered that he be displayed as proof that no man, however cruel, could defy God. But Ezzelino refused treatment. He tore the bandages from his wounds, spat on the food they offered, and swore he would die on his own terms. For 3 days he endured, bound to his bed, his body broken, yet his eyes burning like coals. A priest who attended him claimed that during his final night, Ezzelino began to whisper strange words, not Latin, not Italian, a language no one could understand. His last words were said to be, "The fire does not end. It moves." He died the next morning, his body twisted in a grim smile, his eyes wide open. But death did not end his story. When the priests came to bury him, strange things happened. His corpse was said to bleed afresh when touched by holy water. The grave they dug collapsed 3 times. Fearing that even in death he would bring ruin, they ordered his body to be buried secretly, in an unmarked pit outside Verona. Yet rumors spread that the earth itself rejected him, that his tomb sank, cracked, and disappeared by the next dawn. Centuries later, when chroniclers and monks searched for his remains, they found nothing. No coffin, no bones, no trace. It was as if Ezzelino had dissolved into legend, or something darker. The stories that followed turned him into myth. Mothers frightened their children with his name. Soldiers swore they saw him at night before battle, a black figure on horseback, his armor gleaming faintly, his voice whispering from the wind, "Fear is eternal." Some say his spirit haunts the ruins of his castles, walking their empty halls as the fires of hell flicker in the distance. Others claim he never truly died. That the rituals he practiced, the blood he spilled, had bound him to the land itself. The chronicles of the 14th century describe sightings of a rider cloaked in black, whose face glows pale in the moonlight, appearing during wars and plagues. Always at the edge of battle. Always watching. Never aging. Historians call it folklore. But in the villages around Verona and Padua, they still whisper his name carefully, as if he might hear. Ezzelino III da Romano. The Devil Prince of Italy. The man who ruled through fear, lived through blood, and died without surrender. A king who became a curse. And maybe, just maybe, he still rides, unseen, in the mist of forgotten battlefields, where the echoes of his cruelty refuse to fade. Because monsters die, but legends never do.